Veterans, what's the moment you realized your closest battle buddy betrayed your trust? My squadmate stole my letters from home, sold them to mock me, and left me to take the fall for his mistake. I reported him, watched him get discharged, and now he's begging me to forgive him from a halfway house. The dust tasted like dried blood and regret. It coated everything. Our gear, our skin, the stale air in the barracks. We were hunkered down in forward operating base Falcon, a collection of concrete barriers and sandbags under a relentless sun, somewhere in the Anbar province back in '07. My closest friend, my literal battle buddy, the guy who had my back and I had his, was Sergeant Jake Miller. We'd gone through basic together, AIT, deployed on the same bird. We knew each other's families, shared dumb jokes, covered each other on patrol. He was the brother I chose, the one bonded by shared fear, boredom, and the grim reality of the job. Our routine was a predictable cycle of patrols, guard duty, maintenance, and trying to find new ways to be miserable or distract ourselves from it. Letters from home were gold, little pieces of sanity, connection to a world that felt impossibly far away. My mom wrote every week, sometimes my dad, my sister. They weren't particularly dramatic letters, just updates from suburban Ohio, how the garden was doing, the dog's latest antics, church bake sales, local gossip, mundane stuff. But to me, they were lifelines. I kept them stacked neatly in an ammo can under my cot, tied with a piece of parachute cord. Read them over and over until the paper was soft and worn. Miller, he didn't get many letters. His family situation was messy, something he rarely talked about. He got a package now and then, usually beef jerky and old magazines from an aunt, but not the regular, heartfelt correspondence I did. I shared what little I had, snacks, news from back home that wasn't filtered through AFN. I tried to include him, like you do with a brother. The first sign something was off was subtle, a creeping chill I couldn't explain. It started after the incident with the drone. We were supposed to be prepping the RQ-11 Raven for a short surveillance flight. Simple mission, standard procedure. Miller was responsible for the pre-flight checks and logging the equipment. I was doing comms checks and prepping the launch area. The Raven wasn't high-tech, basically a glorified RC plane with a camera, but critical intel came from those flights. This one specifically was meant to get eyes on a grid square we'd had increased activity in. Miller was always a bit relaxed about paperwork. Detail-oriented he was not. He had a knack for getting things done, sure, but sometimes he'd cut corners. I'd covered for him before, fudged a minor detail on a log, helped him finish maintenance he'd procrastinated on. Small stuff, the kind of mutual support battle buddies provide. This time was different. He finished the checks way faster than he should have, signed off the logbook with a flourish, and slapped it shut. "All right, she's good to go," he'd said, wiping sweat from his brow. "You sure? You went through the checklist pretty quick," I remember saying. The sun was beating down, reflecting off the sand, making everything squint-worthy. It was hot, yeah, but rushing pre-flight on a piece of sensitive equipment? Yeah, man, I hit everything. Just efficient today. Let's get this bird in the air so we can catch some rack time before guard. He gave me that easy grin, the one that usually disarmed any doubt. I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just on his game. We launched the Raven. Everything seemed fine initially. It climbed, we got the video feed. Then, about 10 minutes into the flight, the video flickered, froze, and went black. Comms dropped. We tried troubleshooting, running diagnostics from the ground station. Nothing. The drone was just gone. Off the grid. Panic, cold and sharp, prickled under my skin. Losing a drone wasn't like losing a set of keys. It was a big deal. Expensive, yes, but more importantly, it was a security risk. Where did it go down? Could someone have recovered it? The camera data? Staff Sergeant Davies, our squad leader, was on us immediately. What happened? Where's the feed? Miller and I looked at each other. Miller's usual confidence seemed to drain away, replaced by a pale, tight look around his mouth. "Don't know, Staff Sergeant," Miller said, his voice a little too steady. "Lost signal. We're trying to reacquire." We spent the next hour scanning frequencies, checking telemetry logs. Zero. The Raven had vanished. The investigation started immediately. Losing sensitive equipment triggers a whole chain of command freakout. Captain Rodriguez came down herself, all business and no nonsense. She wanted the logbooks, the ground station data, our statements. Miller and I gave our statements separately. I recounted what I did, the comms checks, prepping the launch. I mentioned Miller finishing the pre-flight checks quickly, but said I assumed he was just being efficient. I didn't know he'd cut corners. Not then, not for sure. Later that day, back in the barracks, Miller pulled me aside. "Hey, listen, about that Raven." He was fidgeting, something he only did when he was seriously stressed. "When I did the pre-flight, I skipped part of the antenna check. The secondary sweep." My blood ran cold. The secondary sweep checked for hairline fractures or loose connections that might not be visible. Skipping it was a direct violation of the checklist. A critical one. "You what?" I kept my voice low, but the anger was immediate and hot. "Jake, that's Prol 101. Why would you skip that?" "I was tired, man. It was hot. Look, it was probably fine anyway. Maybe it just had a random malfunction." He wouldn't meet my eyes. Or maybe skipping the check meant a faulty antenna connection that failed mid-flight. The implications hit me hard. If the investigation found he'd skipped checks, he'd be in serious trouble. Negligence, potentially contributing to the loss of a drone. "They won't find out," he said, trying to sound confident, but his voice cracked. "The logbook is signed off. Nobody saw me. Except I told Captain Rodriguez you finished the checks really fast," I said, instantly regretting even mentioning his speed now. His head snapped up, eyes wide with alarm. "You what? Why the hell would you say that?" "Because it was true, and because I thought you were just being efficient, not skipping vital steps." I lowered my voice further, conscious of the other guys in the barracks. "Look, Jake, you need to come clean about this. It'll be worse if they find out later." "No way." His voice was a harsh whisper. "They'll hang me out to dry. You think they care I was tired? This is my career, man. And what about the truth? What about the fact that you made a mistake that lost a drone? It was an accident." He ran a hand through his already messy hair. "Look, just stick to the story. We did the checks. Something something went wrong. End of story. I can't lie, Jake. He stared at me, and the look in his eyes wasn't my friend anymore. It was desperate, calculating. You're my battle buddy. You have my back. Having your back doesn't mean lying for you on an official investigation involving lost equipment, Jake. That conversation ended badly, with him storming off and me feeling sick to my stomach. I didn't know what to do. Report him, the guy I trusted with my life, or stay quiet and potentially be implicated if they figured it out? Over the next few days, the investigation intensified. They were thorough, re-interviewing us, looking at training records, maintenance logs. The pressure was immense. I stuck to my statement. I did my part. I saw Miller sign off the log. I didn't witness him skipping the check. It was the truth, but it felt like a lie of omission, protecting him. Then things got weird. Really weird. One evening, Spec Kowalski, a quiet guy from C Company who sometimes hung around our squad bay, approached me awkwardly. He was holding something in his hand. Hey, OP, he mumbled, looking nervous. You lose something? He held out a piece of paper. It was one of my letters. From my mom. The one where she talked about our dog, Buster, chasing a squirrel up the oak tree. My stomach dropped. Where did you get this? Kowalski shuffled his feet. Miller gave it to me. Said you wanted me to read something funny. My blood ran cold. Funny? There was nothing remotely funny about my mom writing about the dog. He gave it to you? To read? Yeah, and some other guys, too. Kowalski's face was pale. He was showing them your mail. Showing them to mock me? The words were out before I could stop them. The bizarre cruelty of it hit me. My private letters, shared for, what? Entertainment? Humiliation? Kowalski wouldn't meet my eyes. I don't know, man. It was weird. He was reading parts out loud, making jokes. He trailed off. My hands were shaking. My letters? The only connection I had to home, to my family, shared and mocked by my battle buddy? Why? Why would he do that? I stormed back to the squad bay, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and confusion. Miller wasn't there. I went straight to my ammo can. The lid was slightly ajar. I threw it open. My neatly stacked letters were gone. Every single one. A cold, hard knot formed in my gut. This wasn't just about the drone anymore. This was personal. Deeply, sickeningly personal. I found Miller outside, smoking a cigarette, trying to look casual. Where are my letters, Jake? My voice was low and flat, but I could feel the tremor of suppressed fury. He blinked, feigning innocence. Your letters? I dunno, man. Where'd you leave them? They were in my ammo can. Now they're gone. And Kowalski just told me you were showing them around, making jokes. His casual demeanor evaporated. His face went hard. Kowalski's lying. He's not. My voice rose slightly. And my letters are gone. Where are they, Jake? He took a step towards me, his eyes narrowing. Look, I don't know anything about your damn letters. Maybe you misplaced them. Maybe someone else took them. The blatant lie, the attempt to turn it back on me, was like a physical blow. You took them. You took my letters and you showed them to other people. Get off my back, man. He spat, his own anger flaring, a defensive shield. Maybe you should worry less about your mommy's letters and more about why that drone went down. That did it. The implication, the shift of blame, the callous dismissal of something so important to me, combined with the cold, hard certainty that he had taken them. The picture clicked into place with sickening clarity. He'd made a critical mistake with the drone. The investigation was closing in. He was stressed, desperate. He saw my letters, private, personal, emotional, as a potential weakness, something he could use to, what? Distract? Humiliate me so I wouldn't talk? Or was it just pure, desperate lashing out and selling them? Maybe not for money, but selling my privacy, my connection to home, for some twisted form of social currency or distraction among the guys. The idea that he literally sold them to mock me felt surreal, but the effect was the same. My most private thoughts, my family's words, turned into a public spectacle for humiliation. The cold, hard calculation in his eyes now was undeniable. He wasn't just covering his ass anymore. He was actively trying to shift blame, to create a narrative where I was somehow responsible, or at least distracted and unreliable. And using my letters, my anchor to sanity, was the weapon. You took them, I repeated, quieter now, the fury replaced by a chilling sense of betrayal so profound it hollowed me out. You took my letters, you showed them around, and you're trying to make me look bad because you screwed up with the Raven. He didn't deny it this time. He just stared at me, his face a mask of defiance and fear. Go ahead, he sneered, his voice low and venomous. Tell them, see what happens. The threat was implicit. He still had leverage, real or imagined. Maybe he thought I wouldn't risk the repercussions, the disruption, the possibility that some mud might stick to me just for being associated with him and the lost drone. I walked away from him then, back towards the barracks, the weight of his betrayal crushing me. My letters were gone. My battle buddy, the guy who was supposed to be closer than a brother, had violated my trust in the cruelest way, not just professionally by covering his mistake and risking our necks in the investigation, but personally by stealing and mocking my most cherished link to home. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my cot, staring at the empty space where my ammo can of letters used to be, the gnawing emptiness in my chest mirroring the void left by his friendship. I replayed every interaction, every shared moment, trying to reconcile the Jake Miller I thought I knew with the person who would do this. It was impossible. The man who laughed with me, who watched my back on patrol, could not be the same person who stole my mother's letters and used them to hurt me. But he was. The next morning, I went to Captain Rodriguez's office. It was the hardest walk I've ever taken. My hand trembled as I knocked. She motioned me in. She looked tired. The drone investigation was clearly a headache. At ease, Sergeant. What is it? Captain? I started, my voice rough. I need to amend my statement about the Raven. She leaned forward, her expression changing from weary to sharp. Go on. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I told her about my conversation with Miller, where he admitted skipping the antenna check. I told her about finding out he had taken my letters and was showing them around, attempting to humiliate me, which I believed was an effort to discredit me or distract from the investigation focused on his actions. I presented the fact that my letters were now missing from a secure area he had access to. I won't lie, it felt like tattling. It felt like the ultimate betrayal on my part, reporting my friend, my battle buddy, to to the chain of command. But the cold, hard reality was that he had betrayed me first, in a way that was not only professionally negligent but deeply, unforgivably cruel. His actions weren't just a mistake, they were a calculated move to save himself at my expense. Captain Rodriguez listened without interruption, her face unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Sergeant," she said finally, her voice low and serious, "do you understand the implications of what you are saying? You are accusing a fellow non-commissioned officer of professional negligence resulting in the loss of government property, theft, and conduct unbecoming." "Yes, Captain, I do." "And you understand that making a false statement in an investigation is a serious offense?" "Yes, Captain, this is not a false statement." She held my gaze for another moment, assessing. "All right, Sergeant, thank you for your statement. You are dismissed." Walking out of that office, the weight was even heavier. The die was cast. There was no going back. I had reported my best friend. Life in the squad bay became instantly toxic. Miller knew I had talked to the captain. He didn't confront me directly, not with words. Instead, he became a ghost. He wouldn't look at me, wouldn't speak to me unless absolutely necessary, and then only in clipped, hostile tones. The other guys in the squad sensed the shift, the deep rift that had opened between us. Some took his side, believing his version, that I was throwing him under the bus. Some stayed neutral, uncomfortable with the tension. A few, especially after whispers about the letters circulated, looked at him differently. Kowalski, bless him, avoided eye contact, but gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod when our paths crossed. The investigation escalated. They brought in CID, Criminal Investigation Division. They seized the logbooks, interviewed everyone again, more formally this time. They questioned me extensively about my relationship with Miller, the drone incident, the missing letters. I told the truth, calmly and consistently. It was terrifying. Every question felt like a potential trap. Miller was isolated. The guys who had initially defended him started to back away as the CID investigation dug deeper. They found inconsistencies in his statements, discrepancies in the logbook signature compared to others he'd signed that day. They couldn't find the drone, but they found evidence of his negligence during the pre-flight checks. And the letters? This is where the "sold them to mock me" part gets its disturbing color. They didn't find all my letters, but they found some. Tucked into gear bags of guys not in our squad, crumpled in trash cans, even one reportedly found taped inside a porta-potty stall with rude doodles on it. When questioned, some of the guys Miller had shared them with admitted he'd presented them as funny stuff from home, making light of the contents, twisting innocent words into jokes. It wasn't a literal sale for cash, it was a transaction of cruelty, trading my privacy for cheap laughs or to build some weird camaraderie born of mocking someone else. It was psychological warfare, petty and vicious. The CID investigators took this very seriously. It wasn't just theft, it was harassment, potentially intended to intimidate or discredit. The evidence mounted against him. His negligence on the drone check was provable. The missing letters, and the ones recovered and traced back to him sharing them, were damning evidence of theft and malicious intent. The process was slow, agonizing. It felt like living under a microscope. My military career, which I had worked hard for, felt like it hung in the balance, not because of anything I had done, but because I was entangled in his mess. Finally, the hammer fell. Miller was recommended for a Chapter 10 discharge in lieu of court-martial, specifically for misconduct and moral dereliction. It's not dishonorable, but it's not honorable either. It's administrative. Essentially, the army saying, "We don't want you here anymore." It carries a stigma. I saw him the day he left the FOB. He was being escorted by 2 MPs, his face pale and drawn. He looked utterly broken. He glanced over and for a split second, our eyes met. There was no defiance now, just a haunted, empty look. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. I just watched him go, carrying his duffel bag. His military career ended in disgrace, not by enemy fire but by his own actions. There was no sense of triumph, only exhaustion and a profound sadness. I had lost a friend, a brother, and gained a scar that felt deeper than any physical wound. My letters were mostly gone forever. The innocence of those simple messages from home was tainted, replaced by the memory of how they were used as weapons against me. The atmosphere in the squad bay improved marginally after he left, but the trust was fractured. The guys who had taken his side were awkward around me. Staff Sergeant Davies and Captain Rodriguez treated me with respect, acknowledging that I had done the right thing, the hard thing. But the ease, the camaraderie we had before, was gone. The desert sun felt hotter, the dust tasted bitterer. I finished that deployment, came home. The transition was tough, as it is for many. The incident with Miller was just one layer of the complex mess of emotions that came with returning from a combat zone. I struggled with anger, disillusionment. I had done my duty, I had reported misconduct, and I had lost a friend and pieces of myself in the process. I left the army a few years later, not because of this incident directly, but it certainly colored my experience and my view of trust within that environment. I built a life, got a job, found a good woman, started a family. The memories of deployment faded, becoming less sharp, more like a recurring dream. The incident with Miller became a dark, tucked-away chapter. Years passed, a decade, maybe more. I was scrolling through my emails one evening when I saw a message request on a social media platform I barely used. The name was vaguely familiar. I clicked on it. It was from Jake Miller. My heart leaped into my throat. I hadn't heard that name in years. The message was long, rambling, and filled with apologies. He wrote about his life since the discharge, how hard it had been, difficulty finding work, struggles with addiction, legal troubles. He mentioned hitting rock bottom and finally getting into a recovery program. He was writing from a halfway house. He talked about the drone incident, the investigation, the letters. He admitted, in agonizing detail, what he had done. He didn't try to excuse it, not really. He talked about the fear, the panic, the desperate need to deflect blame. He admitted taking the letters, not just to hide them, but because he was messed up and wanted to hurt me because I weren't going along with the plan. He used the phrase, sold you out, not in a literal financial sense, but in the sense of giving away my privacy, my vulnerability, for his own selfish purposes, for some twisted form of validation or distraction among others. The word mock wasn't used, but his description of reading them aloud and making light of them confirmed Kowalski's account from all those years ago. It was exactly what it felt like, being mocked, ridiculed with my own history, my own heart laid bare. He wrote about watching me testify, watching the investigation unfold, knowing he was caught, and the overwhelming shame he felt. He said seeing me watch him leave the FO was the worst moment of his life. He said he understood if I never wanted to speak to him again, but he was asking for forgiveness. He said he couldn't move forward without trying to make amends, and that I was one of the people he had hurt the most. He said he was a different person now, that sobriety and the program had changed him, and that he was trying to live a life of integrity. I read the message several times. My initial reaction was a wave of old anger, sharp and potent. All the hurt, the betrayal, the stress of that time came flooding back, stealing my letters, using them, leaving me to twist in the wind for his mistake. It was monstrous. But beneath the anger was something else. Sadness, pity even. Reading about his struggles, his rock bottom, the halfway house, it wasn't the life I would have wished on anyone, not even him after what he did. I didn't reply immediately. I let it sit for a few days. I talked to my wife about it, explaining the whole ugly story from years ago, something I rarely did in detail. She listened patiently, quietly. "What do you want to do?" she asked. That was the question. What did I want? Revenge? He seemed to have gotten his own form of that through the consequences of his actions. Closure? Maybe. But could I get closure by engaging with the person who had caused so much pain? Forgiveness? What does forgiveness even mean in a situation like this? Does it mean forgetting? No, I don't think I could ever forget. Does it mean excusing his actions? Absolutely not. What he did was wrong, inexcusable, and had real consequences for both of us. Does it mean releasing the anger, the resentment? Maybe. Carrying that weight hadn't done me any good for the past decade plus. Does it mean acknowledging his attempt at making amends, recognizing that people can change, and offering a path forward, not for him, but for myself? This wasn't about him anymore. Not entirely. It was about me, and the space he still occupied in my head, a dark corner filled with anger and hurt. Could I clear that space? I thought about the brotherhood we were supposed to have, the trust that was supposed to be unbreakable in that environment. He shattered it. He didn't just break a rule, he broke something sacred, something vital to survival in a combat zone. He traded my safety and well-being for his own perceived security from consequences. And he did it with a casual cruelty that still stung. His apology felt genuine. It wasn't a flimsy excuse, it was an admission of guilt and a description of the fear and desperation that drove him. It acknowledged the depth of the harm he had caused. After much deliberation, I decided to reply. Not with open arms, not with instant absolution, but with honesty. I wrote back, acknowledging his message. I told him that what he did was wrong, that it had hurt me deeply, and that the betrayal of trust, especially in that environment, was something I had carried with me for years. I didn't downplay the impact of the stolen letters, or being left to take the fall for his mistake. I made it clear that the consequences he faced were a direct result of his choices, not my reporting him. Reporting him was a consequence of his actions. I didn't say I forgive you, not yet, maybe not ever, in the sense of wiping the slate clean. Instead, I said that I had read his apology, that I acknowledged his struggles and his efforts at recovery. I said that while I couldn't forget what happened, I was willing to acknowledge his attempt to make amends. I said that true forgiveness was a process, and it wasn't something I could just grant with a click of a button, especially not after so many years and so much pain. I wished him well in his recovery and his efforts to rebuild his life. I didn't offer friendship or even conversation beyond this exchange. It was a boundary. I couldn't go back to being battle buddies with the man who had done that. The trust was fundamentally broken. He replied again, a short message, expressing gratitude for my response, for not simply ignoring him. He said he understood about the forgiveness, that he didn't expect it easily, but that my acknowledging his message meant a lot. That was the last contact we had. Reading his message, seeing how far he had fallen and was now trying to climb back up, was a strange kind of closure. It didn't erase the past, but it put it into a different perspective. His betrayal was immense, yes, but it was also the action of a scared, flawed human being who made terrible choices under pressure. Understanding why he did it, even if the reason was selfish and cruel, helped chip away at the raw anger. Do I forgive him? I still wrestle with that word. I don't hold on to the burning resentment like I used to. The incident doesn't consume me. I don't wish him ill. I hope he succeeds in his recovery and finds some peace. Maybe that's a form of forgiveness, not condoning the act, but releasing myself from the prison of anger it created. But the trust? That's a different story. Trust, once shattered, is almost impossible to fully rebuild. The fact, especially after a betrayal of that magnitude, in a place where trust is literally life or death. I learned a hard lesson about who to trust and the devastating consequences when that trust is broken. So yeah, that's the moment. The moment I realized my closest battle buddy betrayed my trust wasn't a single lightning strike. It was a dawning, sickening realization that unfolded over days, from the skipped check to the lost drone to the missing letters, and finally to the confirmation that he had used the most personal parts of my life as a weapon against me to cover his own failure. It was a slow, painful bleed of disillusionment that ended with watching him walk away in disgrace, leaving behind the wreckage of our friendship and a wound that took years to heal. And now, a decade later, he's a name in my inbox, a ghost from a past I thought I'd buried, asking for a forgiveness I'm still trying to figure out how to give, if I even can. The dust still tastes like regret sometimes, but now now, maybe, just maybe, a little less like blood.